So, for everybody watching and listening, welcome to the Pivot Play podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson, and I'm here with my lifelong. We've done about a life sentence together, right?
Yes, we have, man. We've done longer than life for some people, man. Life for some folks, they get out early, man. Yeah. We've been for a long time now. Yeah. So Eric is a really great friend of mine, but also a great professional, and we've kind of come up similar but different paths in our professional careers. And amongst other things, I credit my friend Eric with being a rainmaker, the master salesman. And so here's what I want to do, Eric. So let's just talk really quickly about how we met. I think you have better recollections of that time than I do. I do, man. I do, brother. I was so impressed. At the time, I was working for a company in Philly that did computer training. You were in charge of the network technology group and team at a rehabilitation hospital. I was trying to sell you stuff. And I met you actually through the connection with, John and all that at the other hospital you guys were affiliated with. Mm-hmm. And I saw this brother comes walking in the room, and I said, oh my gosh, this brother is doing things because these guys work for him. And I said, I can tell we're around the same age. We're both young guys in our careers. I got to get to know this guy, get to talk to him. But you never know, right? So we're talking about stuff in the meeting. We scheduled a separate meeting. I was in your office. We got to talking, and we started playing Negro Geography, which we did, right? And then we found
hold on.
You remember that?
It's like our form of Ancestry.com.
That's how we do it. But you know what, man? That probably goes back to Africa, but I know it goes back to the plantation. Sadly, that might be one of the few good things that came from the plantation, man, where we that is soul food, right? But we learned, what plant. Oh, I'm at this plant. Oh, I'm over here at that plantation. Oh, okay. Well, I know. Did you know so-and-so? Because they used to be at Master Harvey's plantation. Now they're over here. I did know that was my buddy. So a lot of that stuff does go back. Like I joke and say Negro Geography, right? But that's
right.
That's real, man. That's some real good stuff that came from it. But you and I were chopping it up. Sean and Joel, who are also crushing it, we found that we had those guys in common. And I'm like, what? Because Sean and I go back to 6th grade. Mm-hmm. Joel and I go back to 9th grade. And here I'm meeting you, and we're young. And I said, come on, man, this is too. And you called Joel on the phone when I was there in your office.
Yeah, did I?
You called Joel. He's like, what, Eric, what's he up to? I haven't talked to him. So from there, man, we just started flowing, man.
All right. But there's been a lot that's happened, obviously, since then. And so one of the things I remember is that, and this is what I tell people all the time about you. I've said this for years, is that you have whatever you sell, you deliver. Right? No matter whose head has to get cracked, right? You're going to go back behind the Iron Curtain and jack some people up if you have to and make stuff happen.
Yes.
But also, as you transition through different things, and I was still in some position of influence, so there was always an open door. You never attempted to sell me anything that I didn't need, right? If it wasn't solving a problem, making us more productive, saving us money or whatever, some real advancement, we would still get together and have dinners and chop it up or whatever, but you never even, and so you've always come at it with such a high level of integrity. So this is I think a great place to start. I'll bring this up. So I've used this image when I've talked about business, when I've taught business, when I've helped entrepreneurs in coaching. And one of the first things I did, and I may have still been doing it when we met, was I had a little consultancy called Thompson Technical Services. And I started out doing custom programming for small businesses, maybe a little networking, but it's mostly programming. And I remember I had a couple other buddies who had kind of started something at the same time. And the mistake that we made, which is what a lot of people do, is because we feel that because we're good at something, that people will show up, right? That people will see the value of it. they will understand why they need this thing in their life.
Build the dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. Right.
But I figured this piece out is that, as I struggled through that, is it really doesn't matter how good the product or service is, right? If you can't market it, nobody's going to know. And if you can't manage it, nobody's going to care, right? That's just kind of always been the way I thought about these things. And it's like, well, because if you look around any industry, there's a ton of products or services that are not the best in their field. They're not the best in their vertical. They just aren't. But they are masters at sales and marketing, or they're really masterful at how they manage. Because, the management side, operations, is where a lot of money can leak out as well. If you don't know how to run your operation, that can bring you a ton of different problems. So I look at this piece of it. And again, going back to the reason that I even wanted to do this podcast is, given this current time that we live in, people are going to have to shift. They're going to have to pivot. The thing that they've relied on may not be there anymore. It may not be there in the same way. And so now what do they do? Do they sit and wait for a handout, or do they figure out, how do I pivot into something else? And so what I want to start with is, I believe that in whatever economy we're in, it will always need sales. It will always need sales. So so that gets us to talking about, how did you get into sales? Because I know you didn't start there. But then how have you been able to do it at the level that you have, with the success that you have? And we can talk about some of the stumbles, so I know some of them too. Is like, start here. How do you make sales credible? Because it has, for a lot of people, it just has a bad connotation. Like, it's not cool. Right.
Okay. So the first challenge that people have to really deal with, and what they have to overcome, is the preconceived notion of what sales is. People think sales, they think of the man or woman at the used car lot, and they're dressed with high water pants, polyester suit, trying to sell you something you don't want or don't need, that's too expensive. That's what the thought, or the guy coming around collecting the life insurance every month, and he's just thinking about his own. No. That is, but that just demeans and diminishes the entire profession. What sales is, I'm going to take what the great Zig Ziglar said, and I'm going to add a little bit to it. And for those, if anyone sees this that is a real Zig fan, forgive me for taking a little bit of artistic license here. Zig Ziglar said, sales is a transference of feeling. Sales is a transference of feeling. Now look, I'm going to pause that for a second. Think about this. If you go to if I ask you where you went to dinner last night and you had a great experience, you are going to tell me, man, I went to this place. I wish you lived out here. When you come out here, if you get out here, man, we got to go. This place, and tell me what? Well, man, let me tell you. You are selling. You are transferring that feeling, that emotion to me. You don't work there. You're not going to get a commission for sending people there. But guess what? I want to go. If I find someone is going there, I say, hey, my buddy said you might want to check out this spot to eat. That is sales. Now, Zig stopped at a transference of feeling. I have thought about this for decades. That is not really where it ends. It's a transference of feeling that leads to action. It has to lead to action, or else it's promotions. Promotions is a transference of feeling. So me telling you that I love this pair of pants, okay, that's not, but where's the call to action? If I say I love this pair of pants, I have the hookup with the guy who sells them, or hey, let's go to the store. I'm going there together. I'll pick you up. Let's go down so you can get a pair. Now that's action. There's action on the back end to act on that transference of emotion. That is the requirement. You have to have both sides of the equation, or else it is simply promotions. That's just me saying it, but that's kind of how I view it. So many people leave the call to action out. They do a great job. They lead you all the way up to the altar, and then they walk away and think you're going to marry just just marry yourself. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
You know, you have to have some action on that back end, right?
So exactly. So one of the things that that I've also said about you, but I say it because I heard you say it before, is that you approach sales as an art form. Right. So what does that mean?
So it's the same thing. I'll give you the two. It's a science and an art form. So the science is what so many people think that it's the gift of gab. So in a way, they do already think that it's an art form because they're like, oh, it's like acting. And to an extent it is. I'll push out and zoom out for a second and say the first thing that people don't think about, it is a science. And that might even be a segue into how I kind of got into this thing. My father was the one that said, look, you speak. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I wanted to get into some stuff. I had a bad experience where I was a project manager at Vanguard at a young age, 20, 21 years old. Mm-hmm. I was buying 6-figure computer-assisted retrieval systems. I was doing Jack Bogle's reports. You couldn't tell me anything. But you know what? I was broke. I was making no money.
Right.
This one guy bought, I bought from him. I bought this whole system from him. I thought I was hot stuff. Well, this guy invited me to his house to celebrate his third jacuzzi christening, house in Westtown, PA. Mm-hmm. Jeff Taylor was his name. And this guy brought me out there. He did a toast to me. He had about 150 people. It was Butler hors d'oeuvre. I was living in my parents' house in West Philly. This guy's living the life, and he's the one that sold it to me. Well, I said, how can I be down? To myself, like I felt like an idiot.
Right.
I said, all this time I'm thinking I'm the man. He's the man. I got to figure that out. So that was part of it. And then I had my dad in my ear going, you should be selling gift to gab, all this kind of stuff. So I said, okay, let me use that. Jeff Taylor, I'm going to transition. Well, I got into it thinking it's just that art form of, let me just talk my way through it. I went to work for a training company. And I went to work for this training company. It was one before you and I met. And there were 4 sales reps. I was the worst of the 4. I was getting my butt whipped. Like,
really?
I was getting my.
Okay. I don't know this guy. I don't know that guy.
This was 1988, Eric. Sorry for those. Somebody felt an artery harden right there, I'm sure. But this is 1988, Eric. Mm-hmm. You and I met maybe 5 years later, 93, 94. This is 88. This is still moisture right back there, Eric, right? And I got into this thing, man, and I was showing up every day, getting my butt whipped every day by people who it was hurting my feelings, man. I was just hurt. So I went one day and I said, I'm going to quit because this art form, this thing, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to go back to project management. So everybody's wrong. They're wrong. I can't do this.
How'd you not get fired? I mean, usually if salespeople don't perform, you're out the door.
I had an amazing CEO. This was like the first 6 months that I was there. I had an amazing CEO who just said, man, you have something. You have a certain something, and I really don't want you to quit. Just keep working at it, man. Figure it out. You're the man. So here's what I did. I prayed on it. I did. And I'm not here to push religion. I'm just telling people what I did. Everybody has to do whatever they want to do. Pardon me. I prayed on it. And I heard, whatever you want to call it, a voice, a feeling, something that said, man, before you do that, go to the bookstore, find a book. Yeah, nobody's trained you professionally. You're getting your butt whipped. Take your butt to Barnes & Noble or whatever and buy a book. I went to the Barnes & Noble. They pointed me to the section. Man, it was all these books. This is going to sound crazy and corny and cheesy, but this really happened. I'm standing there and one book, baby little 100-page book. It was like the biggest book on the shelf. It jumped off the shelf at me. I saw I don't know how. There were textbooks up there. And I reached in, I grabbed this book. The book is How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling.
In Sales. Ah.
you kidding me? Look, man, anybody needs to know what
I've seen
Divine
the book, but I don't remember the author.
Frank Bettger, Bettger. It was written in like the 1950s. So even then it was like 30 something years old. Listen, man, the guy was right where I was. He was ready to quit, ready to give up on himself. His boss said, just hang around for a little while. And the guy said, and his boss told him, just try one new thing a week. See if it works. If it doesn't, quit in a few months. So I said, okay, I'm going to follow the recipe. But even the fact that book jumped off the shelf to me, Divine, that came from somewhere, man. Why that book? That book changed my life. I started to incorporate one new thing each week.
Right.
I went from being zero to hero. I went from being the guy who got his behind whipped to beating people so badly that they quit and went elsewhere.
So if it's not going to cause you to lose your place in this story,
no, go for
it. So we have to talk about two things though, because, and this is one of the things that my producer wanted to make sure that we got into, was when did you understand your potential, what you could really do, and then go back to the CEO and how important that person was in your life to kind of help you pivot from where you were, which was failing at sales, to they threw you a lifeline, but also gave you the responsibility, right? Like they didn't give you a book or send you to a course. No. But still, talk about those two things, and we can get back to the rest of it.
Yeah. So, you know what, man? The first one, the former, is so hard because I don't know if we ever really know our potential. Some of us, you are tapped into that better than most of us. I think I'm still trying to figure out, how much can I just jump? I might be able to jump out the window, flap my arms and fly. And I can figure it, so we're always trying to push the envelope, right? Figure it out. But I think, pardon me, I'm sorry, I keep clearing my throat here, a little allergies. No COVID, it's not COVID, it's allergies. Not a COVID cough, people. So I think it was, I think it was when I finally made six figures in sales that I said, you know what, I can do this. This is what I need.
How long did it take though? How long was failing to six figures? Because our stories are so similar, but how long did it take?
It was a decade. It was a good decade, 10 to 12 years. Yeah, it was 10 to 12, somewhere around 10 to 12. Yeah, 11 years. 11 years into the game.
Once you get there, right? Yep. You learn two things about making $100,000, right? One, yep. It's a milestone to be celebrated. As a matter of fact, I remember when I crossed six figures, we actually went to dinner. We celebrated that.
Yes, we did.
I remember that now.
Yes, we did, brother.
So it's worth celebrating.
Yes.
And then once you get there, you realize how little $100,000 is.
Yeah, you're like, well, what now? I
got stuff to do. Yeah. I got things to pay for.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And so, yeah, man, that's so interesting that we have that in common, because when we met, I think when we met, I was somewhere in the mid to high 50s. It was not a lot of money.
Your salary was more than mine. But remember, also
you had commission.
Inflation. So if you do an inflation calculator, I wonder what 50K in 1994, 93, 94.
Whatever math you apply to it, I was underpaid for that responsibility. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right?
You were running a department. I'm not going to mention names because, to protect the innocent, but you were crushing your bosses. You were really running the show.
Yeah, but they were getting the dough, right? You know what I mean? So, but I think that part of it is really interesting. Yeah, man, remember how much money I made back then. But give you the contrast. There were other guys that I knew who were older than me, and I was probably one day complaining about how little money I made. So I'm in the high 50s. So I remember what happened when I left that hospital and then went into financial services. So that was a big maybe a $20,000 jump. And that's really kind of how my career happened. Right. With 5,000 here, 10,000. And I remember a person walking up to me that had just started working at ABC Payroll, and I'm new to the game. I don't know what's going on. And it walked up to me after about 3 or 4 months or whatever. And she actually had a real true pink slip in her hand. Right. You know, back in the day, what a pink slip was.
Oh, it was not. You did not. Yeah, that was not a good thing.
But what she said to me is, we realize in a short period of time that you are overqualified for this job. We don't want to lose you. Here's your new salary. So that's what was on the pink slip. And so I was able to build, you know, again, 5,000 here, 10,000, 18,000. I mean, I remember some really big jumps. So it was moving me up very quickly. Right. And we'll just call this on demonstrated value. Right.
Yes.
And so, but that piece of it. So I get you on understanding our potential, but so now let's go back to this CEO and the role that a single person can play in your life.
And I think that's what it is too, right? Anyone who stands up and says something like, I'm self-made, woman, man, whatever, man, they're lying. You had to get some breaks. Somebody had to hook you up. And that's why we have to remember that when we so-called arrive, you got to hook others up, because you got hooked up. And whether you want to believe, whether that was in your house, in your school, in your church, in some community, civic, neighbor, I don't care. You got the hookup. Because if you didn't, you would not be doing whatever I don't care what it is. If you're doing more than just sitting in a corner on a street corner doing nothing, somebody hooked you up. If you have a roof over your head, food there was somebody put something good in you that you're able to use and now exist and survive and do, especially if you are of color. But that's a whole other, that's for a whole other topic. But yes.
But it's valid. It's super valid. So think about for a second where your life would be had you have rejected that open door, that invitation, right? Which was really just, I'm going to give you room to grow, because let me go back. Probably a better question is, did anyone ever extend it to you and you rejected it?
Yes. Multiple times in my life.
Exactly. And so this goes back to potential, right?
Yeah.
If we understood our potential.
But I don't know that was a bad thing. See, this is where you go, is it fate or is it choice, right? Because here's the thing. Some will say you ended up, and I'm starting to believe this. I didn't used to believe this. You end up where you're supposed to be. Yes, you could end up many different Dr. Moreau type messed up versions of yourself, but still within the same kind of sphere. When I was in high school, I was offered the opportunity. I won this internship, one of two in the entire city of Philly. There were like 400 kids that went for it. I was one of two people. They took one kid out of public school. That was me, out of Overbrook High School. Shout out to the Panthers. And one to another kid who went to a very exclusive private school. And we got to work with physicians at Thomas Jefferson a university, medical school. We got to work on rats, man. I got to work in nephrology, and it's kidneys for those who don't know. And we were doing surgeries for 2 years, man. I was working doing surgeries on rats. Mm-hmm. The dean of the school of medicine was a brother, physician, Dr. James Robinson. This is the guy who selected me. Well, everybody who went through this program, this guy was on the board of trustees at Harvard. And so he could just say, you're going to Harvard. The guy that went to my same high school the year before me is now Dr. Derek Burno. Shout out, Derek. What's up, brother? This guy now is a surgeon. He's a urological surgeon, right? He grew up right around the corner from me. That was my track. So this guy said, okay, you're going to Harvard University. You're already accepted. You got the grades, you're in. And I said, nah. Now, most people would say, you're dumb.
Right. But why? The point is, why did you say no?
I would like to say that I had some really great reason. I did not want to, you know what I mean? The reality was I didn't want to be a doctor. What I learned, we learn more about what we want to do from what we don't want to do, what we don't like. And so anybody listening to this, if I'm lucky enough to have anybody's ear, I would say figure out what you don't want as much as what you want, because it's the process of deduction that will help you kind of figure it out.
But you are, I think we all, this is my belief in it, we are the math that creates our life, right? So everyone's life, in my opinion, is the sum total of everything that's happened to you, right? So if we took 5 critical events out of your life, we'd be talking to a different Eric.
Yes.
But boiled into all that are these decisions that we make. So what I'm saying to you is I can see, where I was just fortunate, right? It was grace on my side, fortuitous situations, the way things came together that put me in some situations. And there's others that I frankly did not have the confidence to walk into. So the only reason I ended up at Lincoln University in 1983 is because I had one guidance counselor in high school who noticed that she never saw me in her office.
Yeah.
Like, and while everyone else was, I had completely different aspirations because, coming out of high school, but education was not a major thing in my household, at least.
Right.
So those were not my aspirations. But she got me in her office one day and gave me a good talking to. And so I ended up applying to one school, Lincoln University, which I got accepted to. And, I have my own thoughts about that, because a lot of kids that went to Lincoln University, a lot of them came out of Philly,
yep.
Baltimore, DC, yep. New York, right. Places like that. Went immediately into some remedial learning sort of situation in college because they did
yes.
not leave high school with the core skills that they needed.
Right.
But that conversation and her nudging me to do that was so impactful that I actually remember taking the day off from work at some point later in my career and going back to find her.
Nice.
To thank her. Because
that's big, man.
Because it was a true pivot, because there was no other influence that was going to cause me to do that. Right. But the other was when I worked for AFS, the owner of AFS had a small investment in a company up in Connecticut. This is when I did the interim CTO thing for like a year.
Right.
So long story short, I'm up there working with these. So I'm working in Connecticut 3 days a week as the CTO, and I'm back and forth.
I remember this, man. That was crazy.
Operating. Yeah. Well, the thing is that I was anybody's CTO, right? Was just but I was in there.
No, but they were
actually helping
man,
to create the
You were doing big stuff, man. They were not paying this brother to come up to Connecticut to just sit there and move paperweights from one side of the desk to the other. You were doing big things. Even the fact that they wanted you to do that. I remember how that whole thing played out, man. That was big.
Well, I remember. So we know how it played out is, I ended up not getting some money from a big sale, right? But
I remember that.
That actually that went from a consultative arrangement to you're our CTO to turning them into a customer, which at that point as a customer, they had the largest margin of any other business at AFS. So AFS was making a lot of money. So again, to your earlier point, I was running the show, but somebody else was making the dough.
Right.
The reason I bring that situation up was that one of the people that I was working with there, and a lot of people know this story, was Joseph Dion, right? Was the helm of this company. But if people don't know who he is, he for over 20 years was the president and chairman of McGraw-Hill Publishing, and also was running a portion of Standard & Poor's, S&P, as in the S&P 500. So he and his partner bring me into a room one day and say, you've done a phenomenal job, because literally I rewrote their technology strategy with those two guys in a room on a whiteboard off the top of my head, just like that. And they're like, we're in the Jerry Thompson business. So the first thing they wanted to know was how much was I being paid? And then after they stopped laughing, and not that I wasn't making good money, I wasn't making Wall Street money, which is where all these guys were connected to, right? What that company did was they did reporting for high net worth individuals, right? Like you needed to have 50 million just to be a customer. And they said, we're in the Jerry Thompson business. we will, and this is what they said, we will walk you up and down Wall Street, because they had an inn everywhere, until you find out what you want to do, and then we'll make it happen for you.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying to you is, I did not have personally the confidence to do that, right? Imposter syndrome is a real thing. You know what I mean? So I totally walked away from that, right? And so had I taken it, my path would be totally different. I don't know if it would be better or worse, but it certainly would have been different.
It would have been different.
So when we go back to talking about our confidence, and you are in one of the toughest areas of business, because as a salesperson, and I think the reason that people walk away, turn away from sales, whether again they got their grandmama's cookie recipe, right, and they think that they can start this great business, which maybe they can, but the idea of having to actually sell that cookie makes their stomach turn. So I'm almost certain that as a salesperson, you've done cold calling. Right?
Oh, tons of
it. So that's what we want to talk about that. And how do you manage rejection, right? Because fear of rejection, I think, is the reason most people don't pick up the phone. There are some stats that basically, if you told a salesperson to make 10 calls today, they'll find every other thing to do and maybe make one or two of them.
Call reluctance.
There's stats out there about the number of salespeople who are totally engaged in the process. They never ask for the sale, right? And we know that you don't just ask for the sale once.
That's that call to action.
Right, but you have to ask for that sale multiple times, right? Is the number, was it 5 or 7? How many times do you have to ask for the deal? I know you know this.
It really depends, man. You'll see some that go from 3 to 7, man. But I think it depends on the industry. I think it depends on what it is. I think the better you become at closing, the smaller that number becoms. That's one of the things that that's one of the things.
But is that relative? But it's so, and I want to make sure we get to some of these other points. I want to make sure we don't lose people. But the better you are at closing. So one of the things that's been a gift, that was a gift to my life totally, is when I worked for AFS, is I was involved in the sales process.
Right.
And what people may not know is, just like there was a turning point for you with that book, my turning point came earlier when I was introduced to Earl Nightingale's Lead the Field. That completely changed everything and started this transformation in my mind. It was after Lead the Field and some other, what we'll call self-help material, which was critical to change in my mind and in my perspective. And really was the first thing, this is really important, because I grew up in church. So, you heard a lot of stuff, right? You got a lot of Bible. It took Lead the Field to make the Bible doable for me. From a principle perspective, it was showing me how I could apply these principles to my life, right? Which was different than, I'm just going to pray and try to be a good person and hopefully good things will come down from heaven to me. Like, I am not a believer.
Right.
Because that's not what changed my life. I'm like, no, and I think a lot of people who are in many different forms of belief are probably carrying around a book that has principles, and if you can distill those principles, you can change your life. We'll leave that.
Right.
Well, the thing that I moved on to after that was things on management, sales, marketing, and negotiation. So while I was a technical person, what really advanced my career was having these other skills that I could take into these situations around selling. Because if I was in-house and I'm trying to get a project or something done, or I want to convince them to buy this new product, if I just talk to them in technology terms, they're going to glaze over in the first 10 minutes. So learning how to create that value proposition, learning how to bring this thing back in their context and help align them to, this is why this is critical for the business, right? You say you have this goal from a technology perspective. In order for us to get there, we need to do these. But I had those skills kind of going in and continue to sharpen those knives. So you mentioned earlier that the closing becomes easier, right? So that's based on skill, but is it relative to deal size? That's what I wanted to get to, because I've been a part of really small sales, but I've also been a part of, $5, 10, 50, $100 million sales. And those lead times can be really long. And I know you have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, even now, I'm a VP of sales now. I still sell. I keep a certain patch. I've got reps, handful of reps around the country who are selling. And, yeah, sure. Deal size absolutely matters. I think what you're selling matters as far as the sales cycle and how long stuff takes. And I think people's personalities, and that's why I talk about the fact that I've got a team. I have a team that has, just like everybody has strengths and areas of growth, I'll call them, right? So those areas of growth we need to understand, but we need to lean into our strengths. And that's very different also. And that's what also helps shorten those lead times. I believe that God, the creator, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever, I don't care what you call it, Uba Duba, whatever. Whatever sent you here, however you got here, you came with a certain set of skills and strengths that you just entered this planet with. You now have to hone those. You have to find out what they are and hone them. Now, what a lot of people have taught, and I think this is where it goes rogue, they'll teach you, hey, work on the weaknesses or those areas of opportunity, as I'll call them, right?
Right.
Work on those to become more of a complete person. So then you can, if you're in sales, hey, you can shrink that sales cycle because you're more of a complete person. I disagree. It took me decades to figure out that's the wrong advice. Take it's the wrong advice. So anybody watching, whatever it is, don't, and they say, oh, you're not this, you're not that. You go into this negative mindset. I got to go and I got to improve myself. Yeah, you sure, personally, you should be improving to make yourself a complete person. I'm not saying that. I don't want anybody to take away that's what I'm saying. But what I am saying is professionally and probably personally too, to some extent, spend more time even mastering that which you came here. Hone that skill. It's a blessing. It's a gift. You didn't do anything to get it, but now you should do something to keep it, to make it better, to glorify whoever or whatever it is you want to glorify.
Right.
That's what's going to make you. When I realized that's when my stuff it wasn't just luck. It wasn't just a little bit of science and a little bit of art. It was building something big.
Well, it's also, I think, in that's a great point. And I think people are so busy trying to be perfect. Right. And there's a quote that said, perfect is the enemy of good. And what they don't understand.
I live by that, by the way. Right. I love that.
Is that 80% in most situations is an amazing success.
That's right.
The time and expense and minimal sort of gain that you get from trying to close the gap on that final 20% is usually not worth it. One is it's super expensive. It takes a really long time. And then even once you get there, no one's going to care.
Right.
I'll give you an example.
Right.
So we've all been using some form of a word processor for decades now, right? Microsoft Word used to be Word Perfect back in the day.
Yeah.
Most people don't remember that.
I used to still remember. That's what I used to still training.
Yeah, I know.
Even Multimate, DisplayWrite, all of those old ones.
Which people don't even remember those things. But my point is, we've been using these things. Google's got their own, Apple's got their own, Dropbox has their own. But here's the point. If you've been using Microsoft Word for any period of time, there's always a new version that comes out. And what they're doing with the new version is they're adding features. Dude, we type, we spell check, we bold, we underline, we create a table, we do some bullets. That might be about, no matter what they do, and they're continuing, the features the list of features is so long because they believe that they're selling on features. Now, again, other platforms become much more, a lot more capability, but by and large, there's still a sweet spot. And this is what my point when I say perfect becomes the enemy of good. So now let's go back to, let's take a scenario. I have my grandmother's cookie recipe. Everybody loves these cookies. I had this great job. I'm now furloughed. right? Because this is really the story of Colonel Sanders.
Yep.
Right. He reached retirement.
Yep.
He got that first retirement check, right? Maybe pension, Social Security, whatever it was. And it's like, I can't live on this. So the story, as I understand it, is he took the one thing that he had of value, which was this chicken recipe. And his idea was that he would go to restaurants, share his recipe, and they would make more money. He just wanted a percentage of their increased earnings or profits. That was the story.
Yeah.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
What most people don't understand, first of all, he was in his 60s when he started this. So I believe it's never too late.
Right.
Right. But to your point, you came here with you have something in your hand that you could turn into something more, right?
Everybody does. It's not just me, it's everybody. Every person who can hear our voices should think about, what is it that I am good at? What is it? What skill? What things do people appreciate that I say or do? And you got to get past a lot of nonsense. Parents, people might have messed you up, told you were nothing, told you were never going to be anything. Don't listen to that. Think about the things that you have inside of you. Everybody has something or some things, some talents, some gifts, some things that they're really good at. Find those, lean into them, and figure out how to monetize them.
Right. But it's developing that stick-to-itiveness, as we call it, right? That intestinal fortitude.
So what part is it you want me to address? I mean, is it the dealing with rejection? Is it I want to make sure I understand what the
I want to take this is my product, right? So let's go back to here, right? So my product is my grandmother's cookie recipe.
Okay.
And we know that you cannot build a business on I have the best cookie.
No. Well, so I think I get it. So here's the deal. The first thing you have to do, no matter what you sell, you got to think about who cares? Like, how does it help? Don't think about it in terms of, you're right, like features. Think in terms of function. Think in terms of what it's going to do for the intended consumer, whether that's a business, an actual person. So whether it's B2B, business to business, or business to consumer, whatever your product is, if I have cookies and I'm selling them to consumers, why do people care? What if people told me before about these cookies that are so fantastic that they would want to spend time, spend money investing in? So it's thinking, begin not just with the end in mind, which is important, but begin thinking about and think through the lens of the buyer. And that's what a lot of people don't do. So think about, what is it that this person is looking for and that's why market research and all that stuff up front, a little bit, you talk to people, cook up cookies, give them out, hear what people love, what, it's okay. Lean into what's great, work a little bit on the other stuff, and accentuate the positive, right? So think of those things, be ready for those things. Think about the possible negatives that might come out. Like, well, it's a little expensive. Yeah, it's a little expensive, but you're not buying these every day. These are not your everyday, this is not, you want to go buy a Oreo, you can buy those anywhere. You can't buy these anywhere. So you're going to pay a little more, whatever that is, right? But think about it from the consumer's perspective, not from what you think is important. For nobody cares. You're a means to an end. You're that conduit between the product and the consumer of that product or service. And that's really where salespeople are. When salespeople stop and think, it's not about me, it's about who it is that has to use this. My job is I'm the evangelist. My job is to take this, frame it up in a way that they can consume it, that they want to consume it, and help them get access to it, and then step back.
So how about a situation where, and I think that's an entire exercise, right? You mentioned something else there too, is that you may have to bake some cookies and give them away for free.
Oh yeah.
In the beginning,
you got to do the research. I mean, if you don't do the research, you are playing by yourself. You could get lucky, but that's what it is. If you're successful, if I create anything on my own and I don't test market it, I don't bring people in to say, hey, what do you think? And, a lot of artists get very sensitive about their stuff, right? And so they don't necessarily want that. They don't